majority of my teaching and coaching career trying to manage the balance that Kate has just talked to us about. How do we live within a system and really believe in teaching emergent bilingual students and yet deal with the pressures from the outside and maintain our integrity? So I hope that today we're going to build some doorknobs and build some confidence too, because as you saw from Kate's presentation, policymakers are making a lot of policies, but they're not basing these policies based on either an intimate knowledge of the students nor on research. They're basing policies based on politics, right? So because of that, you guys are the advocates. You guys are the experts who need to think, well, within this huge wave coming crashing on us, what are we going to do creatively so we maintain the integrity and maintain kind of the spirit? You know, I think everybody's here because we love what we do and we really believe in the students that we're working with. And how do we protect them? How do we protect our space? So I don't know if you've heard the saying, cuando te dan limones, haces limonada. So when they give you lemons, you make lemonade. So that's what I hope we're going to do today. So I titled the talk, Reclaiming Assessment Data for Emergent Bilingual Learning and Programming, because we're the owners of this. We're the owners of our schools and our programs, and we need to make sure that we're not pushed around by all these mandates, but that we make sense of them for ourselves. So this is kind of what Kate's discussion questions were, but for about 5 minutes, and Nelson, can you help me?
Yes.
I have a self-assessment. So are you guys sitting with your schools? Okay. So I have 4 different statements here, and I want you to quickly discuss them. Maybe you can pick one of them since we have limited time. I want you to discuss them with your team. So the first one is we have a solid understanding of the validity and reliability of assessments we use for our EBL students. And I want you to really think of your assessments not only as the ELA and NYSIEB, but also the informal or formative assessments that you're talking about. And validity refers to the ability of a test to test what it proposes to. So just like Kate's example of the math test, does it have validity for Hungarian students in a geometry class? What do you think? Yes, because it's testing Hungarian students who know the language, their knowledge of angles, right? But does it have validity for a group like you guys? Do you think that that test really was valid for you? No. So you see that validity changes depending on the group. The second statement is the inferences we draw about EBL learning needs from data are accurate. So when we get a test score, so the ELA comes back to us or the NYSIEB comes back to us, are we making appropriate conclusions based on that data? Or do you sometimes think, no? We use a variety of formal and informal assessments to gauge emergent bilingual learner content learning and language development, right? So do you have a complete menu of assessments where you're learning about students' content knowledge and their language development? And the last statement is we modify classroom-based assessments to account for emergent bilingual learners' student needs. Okay, so, is Nelson around? So if you can pass out the sheets, and for 5 minutes, talk about one of those statements with your team.
Wow, you feel the sickness of that? I just got boxes of paper. The other thing I get out of this formal assessment last year, we used it. I mean, our end of the year tests. different from this year's one. Because it wasn't made up of the dish right that was the way that I think that was. Multiple choices. Okay. Note taking and then reading to passages and then writing down end of second grade with for our non-EBL students. So for our EBL students, first of all, note taking is not a skill.
198 and 201, right?
202. Are they setting up 201 instead?
I know.
202 is this one.
No, this is 203.
Oh, 198 is already set up.
Does it have food table?
Yeah, round table.
Does it have table for food too? Or are they putting the food out here?
I'm gonna go check. If not,
Because there's tables out here that they could maybe move over there.
yeah.
Or we can put the food here. We figured
I
out
don't know
where
where they're gonna put the food. Could I go ask them?
Well, we were asking with tables in each of the rooms to set up, but I think we forgot to ask for the table. I don't know. Okay, I don't know if he's gonna have time to make copies because he's helping to set up the
Story. They're never going to get this question. It doesn't matter what. It has nothing to do with their reading ability, their background knowledge. I am better because my knowledge is their background knowledge. They can write 5 interesting facts they learned about whales. They do a beautiful job. If I gave them that or the dog stories, they're sitting there going, what?
So start from the premise that the test is going to be biased and be valid. Talking about FMPs and getting more readings, one flower we just said.
Talking about we do an individual assessment on each child 3 times a year. Right. Now, there are 2 stories in the generally always start out regardless of what they've read before or after with the nonfiction. Because one's on the whale, one's a story about a girl who writes a long I think that no scary thing. We do it on sea life. They know about whales. They're going to do much better on their assessment if I pick the right up. Is it semi-cheating? I don't know. Yeah, I suppose it is, but the bottom line is, why would I give any of my students a book that they don't have background knowledge and it makes it so much harder for them? That's my whole point.
But the test valid if you ultimately biased. No, it's not valid. Right.
Okay, guys, come back. My cafeteria experience is not working. So I heard a lot of interesting things, and for the sake of flow, I'm just going to summarize them. at Medford Public School, they were talking about their choice in running records. And at each level for the Fountas and Pinnell running record, there's a nonfiction selection and there's a fiction selection. And they noticed that the fiction selection doesn't have, children can't connect to the fiction selection while children can connect to the nonfiction selection. And they're asking, is there validity when there's cultural bias? And that's a great question, because as we think about our assessments, we have to think about, where do we want to go? We want to test reading in this case. So if we want to test reading, we're going to choose the reading selection that students have prior knowledge in, so we can assess their reading, not assess their level of prior knowledge. So these are the decisions that you guys have authority to do within a classroom. At other schools, we're talking about looking at realizing that some assessments don't have validity for their students, so then going to other assessments and thinking about, well, if this is not telling us what we need to know, how can we find an assessment that does? And at another school, they were talking about sharing the data globally, because our ESL students are not ghettoized to the ESL teacher, right? So the ESL teacher isn't the only person who should know about those students. The whole community of teachers that work with the students need to know. So how do we disseminate that information? I think of these questions as like a tasting plate. So, they're things that you can think about right now, but can develop into larger discussions when you're with your emergent bilingual leadership team. So why do we have to think about how to create doorknobs, as Ophelia said, or wave breakers? And as you know, there's a lot of external accountability issues, and I'm just going to gloss through them really quickly. As Kate really identified, there's NCLB, there's Race to the Top, there's SQRs, and there are progress reports at the city level. You know these intimately, and when they come, they're awful. But these are pressures that we have to deal with. But the internal accountability issues are really the core, right? This is really the core of what we need to work on. And there's a lot of research, and if you're interested, I can send it to you, that schools with EBL students need accurate assessment that assess two things: students' content knowledge and their language development, right? We cannot separate that. We need to know, we can't just test their content, we need to see how they're developing linguistically. And there's a lot of research on schools who have strong internal accountability, schools that have a strong vision that was created at the school level do much better than schools who kind of fly in the wind of all the external accountability. The city says, take this test, they take the test. They say, do this, they do that. If you're, as adults, we know that when there's too much to do, we end up not feeling true to ourselves, right? We're doing the laundry, we're running, we're doing all this stuff, and in the end you say, well, what is there for myself? So at the school level, we really need to build a strong vision of why we're using assessments, which assessments are we using, and for what purpose? What purpose? How is it going to benefit the learning of emergent bilingual students? So today what we're going to do, quickly, is I'm going to give you a quick overview of assessments, which you guys know, but I hope to reframe that. Then I'm going to talk about what can we do with this type of data, and I'm sure that you guys as experts have lots of ideas as well. What about assessment in other languages? I mostly know about Spanish, but I found a resource for everyone that I can direct you to. And then for you guys to think, well, what does this mean for us? This is the action part. What do we need to do to create a cohesive menu or a cohesive body of assessments at our school that makes sense for our school and our students, and that's going to have a purpose that leads us to not just compliance of doing the assessments that the city or the state wants us to do, but with the purpose of improving emergent bilingual learning. So again, by the end of this talk, hopefully you'll have a better understanding of the types, what to do with the data you already have, and then